Long ago, in a quiet valley, surrounded by whispering woods and silver rivers, there lived a young girl named Cinderella, whose heart was as tender as the morning dew. Though her home stood near the grand mansion that had once belonged to her father, she now lived in the small, creaking cottage behind the stables, for her stepmother and stepsisters had taken everything fine for themselves. Yet no matter how hard the days became, how many floors she scrubbed or fires she lit, Cinderella never lost her kindness. Her laughter was like the chime of a faraway bell, and even the sparrows on the roof waited each dawn to hear her sing. But there were evenings when her song fell silent. On those nights, when the moon shone through the rafters, she would sit alone by the dying fire and mend torn dresses, her needle glinting softly in the half-light. One such night, as she searched for a bit of thread, she noticed a faint draught coming from the attic door. Curiosity flickered in her heart. She climbed the narrow staircase, the boards groaning under her bare feet, until she reached the dusty loft. There, beneath a sheet of cobwebs, stood an old wooden chest that seemed to hum quietly in the stillness. When she brushed away the dust and lifted the lid, the air around her shimmered faintly, as though time itself held its breath. Inside lay folded pieces of silvery cloth that gleamed like starlight, a spool of golden thread, and a small note written in a hand she knew at once. Her mother's. "For my daughter, when her heart is brave enough to dream again." The words made her eyes fill with tears, and she held the fabric to her cheek. It was soft and warm, almost alive. That night, something stirred inside Cinderella, a feeling she had nearly forgotten: hope. She decided she would turn the silvery cloth into slippers, the most beautiful slippers the world had ever seen, not for riches or vanity, but to remind herself that even in ashes, dreams could still shine. Every night when the household slept, she lit her candle and sewed in secret. The attic became her hidden world, threads whispering, needles dancing, and the moon watching like an old friend. Sometimes, when the candle flickered low, she thought she saw tiny sparks leap from the golden thread, vanishing into the air like fireflies. She wondered if the fabric truly held her mother's blessing, or if her imagination was simply weaving magic of its own. Either way, she stitched love and courage into every seam until her hands trembled and her heart glowed. Days turned into weeks, and her stepmother grew crueler, burdening her with chores from dawn until the stars came out. "A girl of cinders should know her place," the woman sneered. Cinderella only curtsied, hiding her tired hands behind her apron, and when the door closed, she whispered to the mice who shared her little room, "One day we'll see the sky without dust." The mice twitched their whiskers as if agreeing. At last, after many secret nights, the slippers were finished. They sparkled like frost at sunrise, lined inside with tiny pearls she had once rescued from a broken necklace. When she held them up to the window, the moonlight poured through them, scattering 1,000 soft reflections across the walls. She smiled, feeling as if her mother's arms were around her once more. The very next morning, the bells in the town square rang out across the valley. A royal messenger rode past, shouting the news. The prince would host a grand ball to find his future bride, and every maiden in the kingdom was invited. The stepmother's eyes gleamed like coins. "A chance for glory," she cried. The stepsisters shrieked with excitement, demanding new gowns, ribbons, and shoes. For 2 days and nights they fluttered about like noisy crows, while Cinderella worked herself weary, dressing their hair, ironing their gowns, and polishing their jewels. "And what will you wear, dear Cinderella?" one sister mocked. "Perhaps an apron made of soot?" The other laughed so hard her pearls rattled. Cinderella said nothing, but that night, when they were finally gone to bed, she crept to her attic and looked at the slippers resting in their box. "If I only had a gown," she whispered to herself. The wind sighed through the window, carrying with it the faint scent of lilacs, and a soft voice answered, "Perhaps you do, my child." Startled, Cinderella turned to see a figure bathed in silver light, her fairy godmother gentle and radiant, her eyes twinkling like distant stars. "You have sewn your hope into every thread," said the fairy kindly. "Such faith should not go unrewarded." With a graceful wave of her wand, the air around them swirled into color. The rags upon Cinderella's body transformed into a gown of shimmering blue, the bodice stitched with silver vines and tiny diamonds that glowed like morning dew. "Now," said the fairy, smiling, "you shall go to the ball." But when she noticed the slippers, her smile deepened. "Ah, you need no magic for these. They are already blessed." She touched them lightly, and for a moment the slippers gleamed brighter than stars. "Wear them with pride, for love has made them stronger than spells." Outside, a golden carriage waited, drawn by white horses and shining lanterns. As Cinderella stepped inside, her fairy godmother called after her, "Remember, my dear, when the clock strikes 12, the magic will fade." Cinderella nodded, clutching her heart, and the carriage rolled away under a sky jeweled with stars. The palace rose like a dream, its towers mirrored in the lake, its windows blazing with light. Music floated through the air, and laughter echoed across the marble steps. But when Cinderella entered the hall, the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her as she glided forward, the soft gleam of her slippers leaving trails of light across the polished floor. The prince, who had danced with many but smiled at none, stopped as if enchanted. "Who is she?" he whispered, stepping down the stairs. He bowed low and offered his hand. "May I have this dance?" She curtsied, her cheeks warm, and together they waltzed beneath crystal chandeliers while violins sang above them. Hours drifted by like petals in the wind, and for the first time in her life, Cinderella felt weightless, as though she belonged among the stars. Yet deep within, the faint chime of a clock made her heart quicken. Then came the first toll of midnight. The fairy's warning echoed in her mind. "I must go," she cried softly. The prince tried to follow, but she fled through the crowd, her gown flashing like a streak of light. Down the grand staircase she ran, the music chasing her like a fading dream. One slipper slipped from her foot, clattering on the steps, but she dared not stop. The final stroke of midnight rang through the air, and the magic melted away. Her gown turned back to rags. The carriage became a pumpkin, and the horses scurried off as mice into the night. Cinderella stumbled to her cottage, breathless and trembling, her heart still echoing the prince's voice. She hid the remaining slipper beneath her pillow and fell asleep just as dawn broke. The next morning, the whole kingdom buzzed with excitement. The prince had declared he would marry only the girl who fit the lost slipper. Messengers carried the delicate shoe from door to door. In every house, maidens lined up, dreaming of crowns and castles. At last, they came to the cottage at the edge of the woods. The stepsisters, eager and greedy, pushed forward first. They squeezed, twisted, and wailed, but the slipper refused them. "Are there no other young ladies here?" asked the royal attendant. "Only our servant girl," sneered the stepmother. It would be a waste of time. But just then, a faint squeak was heard. Cinderella's tiny mouse friends had rolled the other slipper down the stairs, and it bumped gently against the prince's foot. He bent to pick it up, puzzled, just as Cinderella appeared in the doorway, shy and hesitant. Her stepmother tried to stop her, but the prince raised his hand. "Let her come." The moment Cinderella stepped forward, sunlight poured through the window, striking the slipper in his hand until it gleamed like fire. She knelt gracefully, and he slipped it onto her foot. It fit as if the stars themselves had shaped it. Then, from beneath her apron, she brought forth the second slipper, the twin, shining and whole. The room fell silent. The prince smiled, eyes filled with recognition. "It was you," he said softly. "I searched the kingdom for your face, and yet my heart knew from the first." The stepmother gasped, the sisters gaped, and before they could speak, the prince took Cinderella's hand. "Come with me," he said. "Let the world see you as I do." The wedding was the grandest the kingdom had ever known. Bells rang from every tower, roses lined the streets, and laughter danced in the air. As Cinderella walked through the palace gates, wearing her secret slippers once more, the people whispered that she glowed brighter than the crown itself. But only she knew the truth. The light came not from gold or jewels, but from the love and courage stitched into every seam. After the ceremony, as fireworks bloomed across the sky, she slipped away for a moment of quiet. In the royal garden, the fairy godmother appeared once more, her wand glittering faintly. "You see, my dear," she said with a smile, "the truest magic is not in spells or stars. It is in the heart that believes even when hope seems lost." Cinderella knelt beside her and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me that dreams, like stitches, can hold the world together." The fairy touched her cheek. "Then you have learned all I wished you to know." From that day onward, the secret slippers were kept in a glass case beside the throne, not as symbols of beauty, but of love's quiet strength. And though the years passed, the legend of the girl who stitched light into cloth spread through every corner of the realm. Children whispered her story under starlit skies. Seamstresses prayed to her for steady hands. And whenever a lonely heart dared to hope again, it was said the slippers shimmered faintly in their glass case, as if answering the wish. As for Cinderella, she ruled with kindness beside her prince, never forgetting the small cottage or the dusty attic where her dreams had begun. Often, in the still hours of evening, she would climb the highest tower and look toward the forest where the moon touched the rooftops with silver. "Mother," she would whisper, "your gift lives on." And somewhere in the hush of the night, a soft glimmer like golden thread would drift through the air, reminding her that the truest magic was never lost, only waiting to be found by those who still believe.